It's always interesting, the psychology of property investors when I'm chatting to them, the idea of if they're to pay for advice or whether they get the advice for free. Because in my view, you're going to pay in one of four ways. The first way is you're going to pay through buying the wrong asset. And that's not an egotistical statement, that's actually from experience in seeing hundreds and hundreds of property portfolios over the last 15 years of doing this, and seeing the decisions that people make in terms of what investment property they buy. Because I think the challenge is that residential real estate is the only investment market in the world that's not dominated by investors. It's actually dominated by owner-occupiers who have an emotional and practical reasons for buying a property. So it's easy to think that anyone can buy an investment property just because they live in a house and it's common and it's known to us, whereas most people can acknowledge that shares is harder and they need the stockbroker to do it, or if they talk to a financial planner for managed funds, those sorts of things. With real estate, there's this, I guess, this false security that comes from, I live in a house, therefore I know what to buy. But I guess from experience, seeing what people have done, having the opportunity to look in the rear view mirror and see what they've done, in my view, quite often they buy the wrong asset. And by that I mean, you know, if I see the result of what they've got today, maybe they bought it 10 years ago, quite often I only see sort of 4 or 5% compound growth, when typically it's not that hard to get maybe 7 or 8%, and in some cases even outperform those averages. So I guess the first way that I see people paying when they're buying property investment or getting a property investment is through buying the wrong asset. The second one is through procrastination. And that's the story where someone says to me, you know what, I've been meaning to do this for 10 years, or maybe even as simple as saying, you know, I've been researching this for the last 18 months. And the challenge is that the market waits for no one. It's going to go up with or without you having a name on the title. And ultimately, the more that you procrastinate, the higher it is that you're going to pay to get into the market. And the opportunity cost of what could have been is sort of, the compounding effect of that is quite great the longer that you leave it. So wrong asset, procrastination. The third one is paying too much. And let's be honest, if you're dealing with a real estate agent to buy a property, one of the skills that they have as part of their, I guess, toolbox in what they do is to be good negotiators. And if you're not used to negotiating all day, every day as part of your job, or have some negotiation skills, chances are the real estate agent is going to out-negotiate you. So therefore, you're probably going to pay a little bit too much. Or if you buy something brand new, and quite often property investors are enticed by buying brand new properties because they're told that it's got shiny taps, get really great depreciation, the tenants really love it. In my view, there's a developer's margin, there's a builder's margin, there's a marketing margin, there's sort of marketing materials all built into the price. So typically to get that shine of the new property, you are paying a little bit more than you would if it was just a standard established property. So again, that's how you are potentially going to pay too much. And then the fourth way that you're going to pay is through actually getting advice. And quite often that's a barrier, because the first three can often happen as a result of getting sort of free advice, where someone maybe sells something to you but says it doesn't really cost you any information to get that advice. Whereas if you go to someone like a buyer's agent who charges a fee to a client to act on their behalf, at face value it actually looks like you're paying a big fee compared to getting the advice for free. But if we break it down, for most people who use a buyer's agent, for example, they're usually borrowing that from their equity to pay for the buyer's agency's fees, which is not too dissimilar to paying a higher price for the fees that are sort of hidden within that purchase price. So ultimately you're borrowing to pay for the fees, but if it's brand new, quite often you could be paying up to 6 or 10% of the purchase price as a sales commission. So again, they're the four things, or the four ways that I think a property investor is likely to pay. Buying the wrong asset, procrastinating, paying too much, or getting professional advice. So clearly, in my view, I think it's a great thing to get professional advice, because if you can actually buy a property that does maybe 1 or 2% better than what you would have done yourself, the compounding effect of that over 10, 15 and 20 years is absolutely enormous, and it certainly makes the money that you pay for professional advice in the early days seem quite insignificant. So in my view, property investors should really look at where they're getting their information from and where they're getting their advice from, so that they can choose which of those four ways that they want to pay for an investment property.